Yes, you're all set. I can see you all ready and jumpy and excited as usual.
I've been ready since like 6 o'clock, dude.
Since 6 o'clock, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry I forgot to remind you.
You said you'll remind me and all.
I like the way you reminded me to remind you at like 6:29.
I figured
Made
I
me
should do that.
feel good. Yes.
Hmm.
So we are going to wait for maybe, I think it's good enough for us to start. So you can just start off by introducing maybe the topic, a little about why we decided to do it, and then we can shoot off the questions.
Okay, so basically we decided to do this because there's a lot of stigma around mental health as it is, and especially during this time where we're away from our friends who usually give us advice, we felt like this would be a good time for us to, for actually her to help you become like a better person. And if you have any questions, and just for you to get some answers regarding the anxiety you feel, especially around this time when it's a really trying time. And and then she sent me some statistics that states that half the mental illnesses begin in the age group 14 to 17. So it's really important for us to discuss this now, so it won't become such a big problem later. So we asked a bunch of our target audience to send us questions, and we got a lot of them, like a lot. So just us answering your question.
Yes. So we are going to be answering maybe about, I think, about 20 questions or so about this specific time period, which is adolescence and mental health. I can see a lot of our cool family members also on the live.
I told a bunch of people, okay? I was excited also.
Yes. So, right. So you can start off with the first question and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, first question is how to deal with toxic friends.
Toxic friends. Is this your own question?
No, no, no.
It's not your
I
question.
got it.
You got the question.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think let's begin by talking about what toxic friendships actually is. And in adolescence, especially, friendships have a huge impact because it's when a person is starting to want to make decisions by themselves, or they're starting to want something. I think till that age, they're always told by their parents or by the structure or by the school that this is how they ought to be. You're getting called in with questions
No,
as well.
my alarm.
Right. So, that's one of the reasons that friendships in adolescence is very important because it starts shaping you as an adult, as a young adult, and then an adult. So, a toxic friend or a toxic friendship is where there would be a lot of drama, there would be a lot of jealousy, a lot of possessiveness, and any conversation with this friend will become all about them. Even if you start off something about you, it would end up being about them, right? um, right. So Vipul says, I never knew about what toxic was until the age of 20. So the times are changing, Vipul. Now toxic friendships start off much earlier. You will be very surprised. So again, like I was saying, there's a lot of drama, and there's, I said, a lot of possessiveness, jealousy, conversations turned about one person, and it's all about their needs. And you will get emotionally drained in the process of being with a toxic friend, right? So, like, your emotional needs, your need in a friendship is not addressed at all. So, what can be done? One of the things is taking a distance from them is not abandoning them. Your needs is also a priority. Sometimes having a buffer friend when you're interacting with that person is always helpful so that you don't take the entire brunt of it. Okay. And also I've also seen in toxic friendships, especially, communication needs to be very specific and direct, with less room for misinterpretation or miscommunication. Not telling a friend something like, let's say this toxic friend asks you, are you coming for a movie or not? If you tell them something like, I don't, not today, that's too less of an information. So that friend is more likely to say, oh, it's because of me that you don't want to come, it's only because of me you're willing to go with another person. So when communication needs to be more specific in that sense, so I'm not able to come today because of this reason. However, I'm also free on these days. If we can reschedule, it will be great. So you have to address the need without minimizing theirs, at the same time satisfying your own need as well. And that can actually help the direct communication, having a buffer friend, taking some space and time for yourself, and find topics to discuss which will not result in a drama. There are a lot of neutral topics. Maybe we should put up, like maybe you can supply a lot of neutral topics that people can discuss about, that is not you know, dangerously dangerous, that will be useful in a conversation with such friends. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, that does actually. I think for a lot of people, it's difficult to deal with toxic friends because you don't hurt their feelings, but also you
Yes,
need to take your health into account also. So,
definitely. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay. Our second question is what to do when you're stressed about your future and exam anxiety.
And exam anxiety. So stress about the future, right? So here, I would say, when it's better to have a specific anxiety than like a vague, free-floating anxiety about everything, right? So your second question, like for example, the exam anxiety is very specific, right? It's anxiety about performance. So that's directed. But anxiety about the future, whoever has it, or whoever those youngsters are who has it, it's important that it is it's conceptualized, or it's concrete, right? So when you're thinking about an anxiety, oh, about the future, I'm like, you get a lot of palpitations, you have a weird sensation in your stomach, what's to come, mom wants something, dad wants something, my friend is doing something, I don't have any plan. That's so general, right? So if you're very specific in what you're thinking about the anxiety itself, okay, what am I anxious about? Am I anxious about getting into a good college? That's specific. Am I anxious about being able to choose the right course? That is specific. Future in general means you would end up feeling anxious about anything and not find an answer to the question that you actually have. So the more you are able to make it comprehensive, it's easier to find a solution for it or to find an alternative for it, right? So that's one of the things to make it comprehensive. The second is always be open to talking about anxieties also. In a lot of environments, family environments, we are not encouraged to talk about anxieties, and it may be pushed off saying, hey, it's okay, just sleep on it, like fine, what is there? You have everything in life. Why do you need to feel
Chuma.
anxious? We are there. Yeah, all chuma, right? So they don't we are not allowed to express that emotion, but so where does that energy go? It will end up being inside only, and that will come up later as maybe sleep disturbances or irritability. Next time someone asks you what are you doing with your future, you might end up being the toxic friend yourself with all that
I
drama.
don't know, leave me alone.
Yes, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about this. So the negative emotions, anxiety, it has to be spoken about. I am anxious about this. Only when you label the emotion and be specific can someone help you with it. I think that's another thing which I want to encourage the youngsters to do, which is start using a lot more language related to emotions, right? I am irritated because I am anxious. I understand you're feeling anxious because, not that I'm not okay, and all these, these kind of communications that nobody can understand what you are trying to say, right? You're still finding your ground. So expand your language, emotion vocabulary as well, and start using that more. The second thing is, when you start feeling anxious, write down. Start writing down instead of thinking it. When it's there in your head, this negative energy, one can will it'll become something else. It'll become a whole new story if it's just in the head, right? Maybe you start thinking of your future, then somewhere there you remember somebody long time back telling you this is something which their son is doing. Then you start asking yourself, what if not? Then some old, third standard, some teacher told you you're not good at math, that will pop up. So that's all. As long as the thoughts are in the head, that's how it's going to be. So start writing down, put down, today I feel anxious, this is the thought that I have. So when it's specific, it'll be better. And at the same time, once it's specific, you can start preparing better, whether it's a resume or it's a college course. Then if it's a college course that you're worried about, then you will know better what to do about. Like, okay, I need to ask somebody my options. or I like this course, I want to see which colleges have it, etc. But if you write down, I'm feeling anxious, there is very little that you can do about it, right? It's so general and it's so vague. So specific, write about it. I think engage in a lot of activities which are relaxing for you. So when you are feeling anxious, don't sit there and spend like half an hour to 1 hour only feeling anxious and becoming comfortable with it, right? I've often dealt with people who are going through job changes, and they would spend like 3 4 hours being anxious about getting a job, and maybe just half an hour a day looking for the job itself. So productivity time comes down. So once you're specific about what you're anxious about, you can start the tasks accordingly. Yes,
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. What if someone's parents are not sympathetic to the fact that they need therapy?
Sympathetic. Right. So I think the way you started off also is by telling us that there's a lot of a significant percentage of mental illnesses itself begin, it may not be identified, but it begins from the age of 14. Okay. And that's also an age where we require a lot of validation about the new emotions that we are all feeling. So the question is, what if the parents are not sympathetic, right? Right.
Yeah.
So when you have an emotion and it's not understood, it doesn't mean that it was wrong in the first place to have that emotion. Right? Often at times, if people don't listen to you, we feel that we shouldn't have had this feeling in the first place. Like, what's the point? Like, I try to talk about it, they're not listening, so what's the point? Like, let's chuck it aside. It's not of any use. So we kind of tell ourselves that it's not okay to feel something when the body and the mind is saying something actually opposite to it. So, what I would say is, if parents are not sympathetic towards mental illnesses or about a adolescent wanting help, one of the reasons could be the stigma related to mental illness itself. Just like how we fear, I think even I, as a psychologist, if I had to go to another psychologist, I will think a couple of times. I'll be like, does it mean that I'm cuckoo? Like, what does it mean? I would think about it myself. I can imagine how difficult it is for adolescents and how much more for parents, where this, from their generation, this was all very new, right? We would look for solutions within the person rather than anything else. We'll say, oh,
Okay.
you know, too much TV, or we are giving you too much of allowance, too much freedom. The common excuses, yeah. You would have heard some of it, no?
My parents are also watching this, so I won't say.
Right. So I'm not going to get into trouble. So, so what's important is understanding that a lot of them, one of the reasons they are not sympathetic is because they are not aware of it, or the stigma related to it, or they don't have enough information about it. So there's a lot of resources which we ourselves, or as adolescents, you can read about it, and the first step is to providing your parents itself the information, right? Like giving them something which says, see, I know I'm feeling depressed. Just read this. These are exactly the things that I'm going through, right? Don't ask me. You can ask me questions, but at least take some time to go through what I've collected, right? And give them some information where they can tutor themselves. They're not going to go and do it by themselves. Less chances of them doing it by themselves. You can give them, give these parents the resources itself. And even if they're not sympathetic, again, doesn't mean that you should not get help. So there are ways in which you can still talk to people. Let's say you belong to a church community and you're close with people there. You can talk to a person in the church community. If you have a school counselor, you can talk to that person. I think sometimes parents accept information when it comes from an adult rather than from the adolescent itself, who says, I know what I want, right? A lot of times, actually, surprisingly, a lot of my clients, I've seen recently this trend that they ask for help themselves and they come. The parents don't bring them. So they are getting into that. I can enable myself to talk to my parents to convince them that I need help. And that amount of belief they need in themselves, that I know what I want. This is not just, getting sympathy or attention, but I really am distressed. I need someone to talk to. And these are the people that you can approach, any community elder or another relative that you're close to. Get them into your confidence, someone who will take you seriously. Or it can even be a parent of a friend of yours who's close. And then use them, or through them, get the information across to your parents. And plus, there are a lot of mental health resources also which is available online, reliable resources which you can direct towards your parents to help them educate themselves. When there's more education, there'll be less fear.
Hmm. I think now also more information about therapy and all are coming to light now. I feel like it's not that stigmatized, but there is some stigma around it.
A
But now
lot of
it's, yeah, but it's
yes.
slowly like coming into the thing where it's actually needed. Like mental health is a real problem. And I think now is when we're slowly getting to that stage where we can normalize going to therapy without it being like, what will people say if you go? Like, I think
Yes.
now it's good.
Yes,
Um,
you are going to a mad doctor, you're going to a crazy doctor. What will people think? These times are changing. It will take some time. But if we are not going to be the change, then what are we waiting for?
mm,
It will never happen.
um, Next question. Do parents really need to talk about mental health and brief teens about failures and heartbreaks?
Yes. Does that kind of answer the previous question? Okay, so
Yeah.
yes, they do need to talk about it. I think it works both ways. Parents also need to start being open about their feelings to children. It can actually start very young. Let's say, like, dad comes back from the office and he just flings his bag somewhere and then he huffs into the room, and the child only sees this behavior, right? There's no reason behind the behavior, but it's done on a regular basis, so that becomes normalized. So the emotion is not talked after that to reason out the behavior. So the child just sees the behavior, and the next time they feel a certain way, they will react that way. But if the father is able to say, I shouldn't have done this, I was just had a bad day at work, I should just learn to cool off, or I should cool off and then come home, or like something along those lines, explaining the behavior or why they had an emotion, talking about the emotion, saying something like, today if you can keep the TV volume down, I'm having a headache that will make me get a little more irritated, so if you can keep it down. That's an explanation. If you just yell at the child and say turn the volume down, and just like, you always annoy me, things like this, the child is getting these mixed messages. Okay, you love me, you're just telling me I annoy you always, like what's happening? So in the lack of clarity is when children look for answers themselves, and that's when they get lost. So yes, parents need to be very open to talking about their own feelings and being accepting and non-judgmental of their children's feelings as well. So that safe space needs to be created where you're not criticized for feeling a certain way, or you're not told to sleep over it, but where you at least someone hears you out is very important.
Hmm. Boredom and lethargy associated with hormonal changes.
Have you ever felt bored?
Yeah,
Does boredom
yeah.
feel good?
No,
Boredom doesn't feel good for you, is it? Like,
I
okay,
mean,
like, do you feel guilty after like a period of time when you're like bored and you've done nothing?
because they're not productive. Yeah, that happens also.
That happens a lot, yes. If you're Indian, you're supposed to feel that guilt after not being productive for a period of time. Yes, that's very true. So that again is like a very cultural thing, okay, where boredom and not doing anything, I think our grandparents, even if you come to their place in the holidays, they don't like to see us just lazing around or doing nothing. No, like do something, please, just do something. So we feel like this strong sense of guilt with lack of productivity and being bored, or lethargy is like feeling tired. So definitely hormonal changes do have an influence. For example, having low thyroid levels can lead to lethargy, or there is this particular neurotransmitter, it's called as serotonin. If that is also less, so that's called as the happy hormone kind of a thing, right? Where you need to have a certain level of it to be emotionally well balanced. And if that becomes too much or too little is when people either become like high, like manic high, or depressed. It can go that way. Okay, yes, I
Okay.
know your parents are watching, so I'm going to say manic high. Right. So changes in that, changes in estrogen levels, progesterone levels, all of this can definitely influence mood changes, which is why even when we get clients who are depressed, we first make sure that those hormonal things are not the reason for it before it becomes like something which they can deal with in therapy or counseling, because those medical reasons can also be there, which contributes to low mood and tiredness.
Hmm.
So the answer is
Interesting.
yes.
How do you handle a difficult member in the family? Because sometimes there's lots of miscommunication and mishaps when put together. Yeah, that's the
A
question.
difficult person in the family.
Difficult family member.
Difficult family member. Are we examples of that? Okay. So,
No. What do you
no,
say? Of course not.
I'm so sorry. You have a space here to discuss your emotions. Right. A difficult family member is what you asked, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, I think one of the things you can take into consideration is not making it personal and about you, right? If they are having a difficult time or they are lashing out at you or messages are not just getting through to them, you should not interpret it as that it's all about you. That's when you will start reacting. And emotion, there will never be a conclusion, right? Sometimes I think we might have all had some experience of you would end up so heatedly in an argument that you forget what you're arguing about in the first place because the emotion takes over. And that's what happens. I can see you trying to agree and then not agree, but
Yeah,
okay.
I like, yup. That does happen.
Right. So I think with family members who are going through difficult times and there's a chance of miscommunication, again, going back to your first question, it's important when you communicate to them, it's clear, no vague things. And also maybe have like at the back of your head a couple of things which can tick them off and steer clear of those conversations. Having a buffer person when communicating to them is very important. The time at which you communicate to them is important. Like if there are certain times in the day where they're irritated, like for example with low mood, there are times when it tends to get worse in the evening. So I usually tell my clients when they have somebody who is going through a tough time and their moods get worse in the evening, and that's when the arguments happen. If you have a need or if you have something you want to talk about, have that conversation in the morning when the mood is better. So even small changes like that can help you communicate better with them. And also focus on tasks which does not involve communication, right? Quality time, just like watching a movie together where you don't have to discuss anything per se, can improve the nature and quality of the relationship both of you share. It should not become only about arguments and only about conversations and things like that. There are other ways to also enjoy the presence of that member. And maybe sometimes changing the location will help. Maybe if you talk to them about what you want when you're out on a trip or you're out at a restaurant, maybe that helps then every time when they come back home and you talk to them about the same thing. So those are some of the things you can take into consideration about miscommunication with a family member. I can also do an entire workshop on communication. So don't let me get started on this live.
Okay. Why is therapy so expensive and what alternatives are there?
You're
Got
looking
a good
like
question.
positively at me, but okay.
I'm
Uh,
just generally asking.
yes, definitely. This is one of the questions which, like, when clients are also referred to us, the first time they interact with us, also, they all have this, oh my God, like, really, for just an hour? So, the first thing is that it's not only about the time spent in the session itself, right? You're asking another person to create a safe space for you, and you're, for a small time, you're putting that person also, you're making him or her responsible for some of your emotional wellness also during that time. So the work that you do in that 1 hour, you will see the results maybe for a day, for 2 days, for a week, even after a year. There are a lot of clients who come, just take 1 or 2 sessions, and then it's just a little tweaking, I would say, that psychologists or counselors do, and then they know how to approach difficulties that they've been facing before, which they've probably been doing it with the same method maybe, or with the same perspective, but having a session just alters their perspective, and then they're set for a couple of years. So it's also the post session results that needs to be looked at. And before we enter a session, we just don't, like, just close our eyes and then open our eyes, okay, next session, just like one after the other. We don't do that, right? There's a lot of preparation which goes into a session, because we have to ensure that we give them value for that 1 hour that they spend with us. So there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of reading, and therapists have to keep getting their skills upgraded, so that we do what is best. New things, new techniques keep coming up. So there's a lot of reading work that goes into that 1 hour alone. So that could be one of the reasons it's expensive. The second reason is based on experience and the number of years of practice and their qualification also, right? The charges might go up, right? So I think if you've just finished college, you may not just start off with charging, I don't know, 10,000 an hour, but therapy can also go up to that much with really qualified individuals, where they know that in the hour that they spend, it's going to be really jam packed. So the expense also goes up. I think we also have like celebrity therapists, and like there's a lot of things in place, but it is valid. So it's the pre-session, during the session, and the post-session results is all what you're paying for during that time. And the alternatives, right? You were looking at alternatives.
Yep.
So what do you do when you're stressed?
I talk to a friend or my family, listen to music sometimes,
Okay.
loud music.
So these are all alternate methods as well, right?
Oh,
So talk therapy is what is counseling. Music therapy, you have cooking. There's a lot of things which are personally very therapeutic for individuals. Now we have a lot of chat-based apps as well, where people can just engage with a counselor. Sometimes just reading about what you have or what you're going through will give you some insight and a better control over these unexplained things, which is just throwing your life into disarray. And I think there's number of mental health pages, websites are all on the rise, right? So even if you Google, I think Google does 50% of some work for you, right? It throws up all the suggestions. You get it on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you go. Based on one search, you will get more results. And definitely talking about it to someone you feel safe with, whether it's a parent or a friend who's able to help out, right? And helping means at least listening to you, no advice giving. That's something which everybody is like PhD in. No, I'll give you advice, do this, do that. But sometimes you just have to hear the other person out, and that itself can be very therapeutic, right? So one of the big in things about therapy is a lot of times improvement happens just by listening to the other person. So those are all the alternatives you have there.
how does someone get over social anxiety as an introvert?
Okay. So introvert is a person who's maybe more comfortable with being by themselves, and they will have fewer group of friends, a smaller circle. Social anxiety means that you kind of are very apprehensive of social situations, and you are likely to avoid these situations, fearing that you might be judged or evaluated, or what if you embarrass yourself, things like that. And I think the best way is to start small. It is not a crime to be an introvert, neither it is to have social anxiety. It's all normal. So not feeling that you're not the only one, right? Often at times we feel like I'm the only one who's facing it. No one will ever understand me. And what therapy itself does is when we tell people you're not the only one, right? I sound like I'm singing a song, but there are a lot of people who also
Anusha,
yeah, I'm
I
here.
got
I
stuck.
lost.
I got stuck for some time and I was just like, huh? Yeah, you were saying.
Yes, I forgot what was I saying. What was I saying?
How you tell people in therapy that they're not the only one. And you said it sounds like you're singing a song. I
Yes, you're
believe
talking
that's where
about
we
social
stopped.
anxiety. That would have been like a better takeoff point than telling me I sang a song. Right. So the best way is to start small. Okay. So to set smaller and more realistic goals. Okay. So for example, you don't have to say if I'm not able to go to this party by or to this festival by the month end, it means like I'm a failure, but to start exposing yourself to these situations in small realistic manners. For example, if you have a difficulty going to the cafeteria when it's like super crowded, you can reach there like 10 minutes earlier so that when you're leaving, the crowd is trickling in, but you're getting comfortable with that. And be conscious of your emotions, write it down, write how you felt, and maybe have like an arbitrary scale with which you evaluate. Like when I start off, I feel like 8, my anxiety is at like an 8 on 10. But when I spend 5 minutes before the other people come in, if I'm already used to the environment a little, I get acclimatized. For some people, right, with the new experience, it's not only the environment, it's the people, it's the sound. So be very specific about what is it that is throwing you off your game. Is it because you feel like you don't dress as well as enough as the others? Is it because you don't feel confident? Is it because you feel like you would have nothing to talk about? Be very specific again when it comes to your anxiety. When you're specific, you can work on it. The third thing I would say is try and act the part already, right? So when you think you can't, you're not going to. But if you say that you can and you act that way, for example, if you're not confident going out, sometimes it's okay to throw your voice out, have a loud voice, keep your posture up, and walk confidently into the room and experience that anxiety at its full. It's not going to kill you, but you at least enact the role of a confident person. And then when you get out of that 5 minute situation, okay, appreciate yourself rather than saying it's only 5 minutes. But it's 5 minutes makes a big difference.
Positive mindset.
Positive
Key.
mindset. Double thumbs up.
How seriously should one take their feeling of loneliness?
So I think loneliness, it can come side by side with low mood. So if it is accompanied by other things like low mood and changes in your sleep routines and crying spells and things like that, then it is a part of a bigger presentation. But if you're feeling lonely because you actually don't have people around and you're also not socially connected to people, then those are changes that you have within your control. In the other one, you can talk to people and get help with respect to that. And also to tell yourself that it's not, I think the biggest fear is thinking of these kind of difficulties as with a sense of permanence, that it's always going to be there, I'm never going to stop feeling this way, can actually be quite distressing. It's like you're becoming a victim of your circumstances, right, by saying this is how it's going to be. When you're a victim, you will not want to change that state because you tell yourself I don't know how to change it. So again, here, identify why you are feeling lonely. Is it because of friends or the lack of a social circle, or sometimes it's because of where you stay. I have a couple of individuals who have gone abroad and they stay really, it's not like here in India, no, you open one window, you know that next door auntie is there and like there's noise around constantly. But in a lot of countries that space Like there's actually that much space between houses, and there's you may not see people around for like hours together as well, right? So what is it then that you can do? Do you want to go out? Do you want to join a book club, a poetry club? Do you want to take a class online where you might meet other people? What is it that you can do? So I would say focus less on the problem and more on the solution.
That makes sense. I'm sorry, did you say abroad they don't have neighbor aunties shouting?
Are you,
Sad, yeah?
are you, which abroad country are you having as a reference source? Yeah.
Whatever foreign country you said.
We have traveled to different foreign countries then.
Ah, okay, next. What to do if you feel discouraged, especially during this lockdown, as they're unable to go for therapy right now?
Again, I think there's a lot of mental health information which is there. So if it's to do with mental health, we have already spoken about what are the various ways in which they can get help. But apart from that, I think it's this attitude of not giving up, right? Of not giving up, and that having this, what if I do this? A very what if strategy, right? What if I do that? What if I can try something else? What if I want to learn a new language? What if today I just want to sleep for 2 hours? Anything, but try something new. I think creativity itself expands your problem solving pathways. Just being creative, right? You always find that the more creative you are, you will be quicker on your feet thinking of alternatives when you are not feeling okay. So that's one of the things you can try: learning a new skill, learning something new, and appreciating yourself for even small things, like for example, if I clean the kitchen counter, I appreciate myself for it. I'm like, you've not done this like so regularly before, but this is the third day that you've done it, like good work. Something like that can also make a big difference. But if you set high unrealistic goals and then you're not able to achieve it, right? The same example of the weight loss, no, by saying that the end of this week at least like 10 kilos I want to lose, and then you would not even start trying it in the first place, and you would end up feeling discouraged. So setting small realistic goals helps. Small ones, like it can be really tiny things, like I want to sort my cupboard out, I want to fold my clothes today, or I want to at least send out 2 resumes today, and then be mindful and appreciative to yourself. I think self love is not something that we do a lot. No, we always want, like you're always told to like be nice to others and be kind to others and love each other, but not ourselves. We should also be
Hmm.
able to love ourselves and appreciate ourselves for the smaller things.
Hmm. That's nice. I like the small goals part. Oh, here's a good one. How important is it for a teenager to communicate their feelings and problems to their parents?
Hey, haven't we taken this question already? Or have I already like indirectly answered it? So
You
it is.
indirectly answered it actually when we asked about do parents really need to talk.
So maybe we can like skip that and go to the next, because
So
we have
smart, you're answering questions I haven't even asked yet.
no
Too
foresight.
good. Okay, here's
Next.
another good one. Everyone I know is in a relationship. I don't think I'm ready for a relationship yet, but I feel like I want to get into one just to fit in. Any advice?
You're asking me?
No, this is a question someone
It's
wrote.
okay. So I think it's very good that this person who sent in this question has an awareness that they are not ready. That itself is showing that they have that clarity, that there is pressure, but there is also clarity about their state of mind, right? And lack of readiness can come from different things. It can to do with um, it could do with family environments. It could do with having to balance a lot of things already that you have. It can it can relate to maybe past breakups and that you're not over it completely. So there are a lot of personal reasons that an individual may not be ready. So if I think the pressure to be in a relationship would be less in India as compared to Western countries at an earlier age. However, it is
Yeah.
still there, right? And knowing that you're not ready is a first step towards sticking to that ground, right? And also when you evaluate yourself in terms of a readiness, it's asking yourself, what do you want to get into a relationship for? Is it just to, like you have asked the question, is it just to fit in, right? Then that would be an external reason to get into a relationship. It's not something internal or personal. Or is it because of like the status, you want to update your status on Facebook saying, like awesomely
In
in
a
a relationship?
relationship.
It's complicated. I think one of my friends put up this very interesting thing on Facebook the other day, which says there should be an option to say desperately single or single and happy. There should be a difference, right? Because everybody who is single doesn't mean that you have to be in a relationship, or just because you're single it doesn't mean that somebody can approach you saying, you know what, I heard on Facebook you're available, something like that. And also to enjoy the time that you spend by yourself. That can also solve a lot of issues when it comes to loneliness. See, being in a relationship or having a need to belong is something which is a basic need. There's something called as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and a need to belong is a basic need. It comes like just after like food and water and all that. There's a need to belong, so it is strong. But what are you specifically looking from a relationship that you're not able to get elsewhere? Are you looking to feel like you're valued or you're worth it or appreciated? Are you not getting this elsewhere? So if you're able to see that you are still able to satisfy those needs through other resources, right? You're good at academics or sports or cooking or a stand-up comedy, then you are getting that, you're satisfying that need anyway. So ask yourself, why do you want to be in a relationship? If it's just to fit in, then that may not sustain the relationship for too long because there's no internal drive, right? So but if you're finally ready, there will be a time when based on whether it's your resources or maybe it's a good chemistry, you like the companionship of that person and you share values, you share attitudes, then you would know inside that you're ready. So not to fit in.
To that person who asked this question, good advice.
I like how you said to that person. Okay, that person.
I don't know. How to support and reach out to anxious people during this time as they don't have someone physically next to them?
Hello. Call, connect, see if you can join a class together, or you can even watch the same shows and then WhatsApp yourself at the end of the day. Or like, I don't know if letters still exist, but you could research about it. So letters, Michelle, are those things that people write to each other on pieces of paper
Oh,
and
interesting. I was wondering
stuff.
what those words meant. I'm like, what is
Yeah, I know you call
letters?
it like ABCD letters. Yeah. So there are ways in which you can still be connected to others. So yes, physical, that's when we realize we have been so dependent on social routines that suddenly this onboarding, things getting online, initially it was difficult, but now I think people are doing a very good job of adapting. We have grandmoms and grandpas who are like Zoom calling each other and all. So there are other ways, alternate ways in which you can definitely be connected and show them that you care. Birthdays can be maybe a call rather than, a message to them. Things like that can make them feel like they still needed and that you love them.
Cute, yeah. How to love yourself? I know a bunch of people who just tell me to treat myself, but I don't think that really solves the problem. So how do I love myself really?
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 Um, okay. So I think more than treating yourself, just this first thing that we spoke about being kind to yourself, which means when you make a mistake, you don't be critical to yourself, right? See if you're actually capable of spending some time alone and being happy, and be aware of how dependent you are on others to make you happy, right? And I've realized that, especially during the lockdown, that I'm actually okay with just pigging out in front of the laptop for 2 hours and watching an old favorite sitcom or something, sometimes just having a cup of coffee and staring at the birds outside and trying to recognize like what species are they. Am I able to spend at least half an hour with myself without wanting something from others, right? So self love, do something which you love, right? It can be painting your nails, it can be like taking an extra long shower and being happy in the process. So it's less about the activity but being mindful of the emotion of happiness as you are doing these activities, right? So if you want to make your favorite meal, do it. If you want to go for a walk, do it. If you want to call a friend, do it. Do anything and everything that you love, right? And that's the best way to love yourself. Sometimes not doing anything also can be a method in which you can show that love to yourself, right? Constant pushing, maybe that is what is stressing you out. So take a back step and be like, I'm okay. And I think that's one of the good things you can do.
Do positive affirmations really help?
Okay, there's a lot of controversies about positive affirmations. I think it works for some people, but if you go into it believing that it's not going to work, it may not work, right? So positive affirmations are like these kind of statements that you tell yourself, and as the title goes, it's positive statements like I am good, I feel good today. And one more thing you can look at is if these statements are realistic, right? Then that also will influence whether you believe. If you wake up one day and say, I'm the Queen of England, it's not going to work, right?
I have
think
3 lakhs in my
somewhere it says you are not the Queen, just go and clean your room. So the statements also need to be like realistic. Something like, I feel a little cranky today, but that's okay. So we can develop positive affirmations on the go. And so telling it to yourself on a regular basis is what makes you believe in it, not just one day in a month and then say, go to Wikipedia and say, positive affirmations don't work. But it has to be consistency in whatever you do.
Is there a difference between saying it out loud or just saying it in your mind? Like, is there a difference?
Anything works. Some people need it to be said to them, but I think you can also say it to yourself, right? Internal dialogue and external dialogue, it works the same way. It's still a dialogue. You can also tell it to yourself. So in meditation, I think they focus on one statement or one mantra continuously. That's an internal dialogue. But when you tell yourself, I often tell my clients, if something is not coming from another person, don't wait for a whole year waiting for them to tell it to you. You can tell it to yourself. You don't need, your friend or that boyfriend or only your mother can tell you that you're good. You can tell yourself you're good. Look at the evidence. They also can see the evidence. You can also see the evidence. Tell yourself, see, I did this. I'm good. I'm a good person. It works for me. So I'm going to campaign.
I can't say it out loud though. I feel like you couldn't relate. You are a positive light source, and I look around, it's like anyone else looking. I find it works better when I say it in my head.
I thought you do that in your videos, but yeah.
It's not, it's okay to
make you should really check out Michelle's videos online. She does talk to herself. No, she doesn't.
In front of a camera, okay? It's not that weird when you do it in front of a camera.
Right. How many more questions do we have?
3 more.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. This one's for parents. How to convey the do's and don'ts when they fail to obey any number of times you say it nicely?
Okay. I think the first, so I'm going to talk from the point of the adolescents, okay? So I'm advocating for like the youngsters. And saying that a lot of times the parents also have to model the same behavior that they expect from the child. And children are very good when they pick up saying that you don't do it, but you want me to do it. So when you give them instructions also, it's important that you model the same behavior. This can be expecting the same thing from 2 siblings or from all the members of the family. It's not only mom who gets to leave her slippers or her chappals elsewhere, but everybody gets to put it in the same place. The rules are the same. That's one. that's when all this sibling rivalry and all starts off. No, the parents, you like her more, you like him more, and I heard a lot of that. No, my parent favors him, I know it. So like I'm going to kill him in my sleep. So much of anger because of these different rules. Okay, that's one, modeling the behavior. The second thing is when you give the instruction also, it's important you tell them what to do and not only what not to do. Like like recently I was working with this parent who told me, she gave me a list of like 20 things and she said, ma'am, I've told him not to disrespect elders, not to raise his voice, not to throw his clothes all over the place. So you're telling the child what not to do, but they also need direction about what to do. So positively framed statements also help, right? And if the repeated instructions to the child doesn't work, so you'll have to ask yourself, are you doing the same thing 100 times and the child has tuned you out by now? No, by now it just becomes like this voice in the background that's like, like every day, let's say at 12 o'clock, one, like some festival, some sounds go on like the neighboring, building or something. So at 12 o'clock, even if it comes after like 6 months of getting used to it, you're just going to like go through it. No, you won't notice it. That's what children do. They try to tune you out. So how else can you do it? You want to sit them down and tell them how exactly it's affecting them and what they do need to do. Also, most importantly, notice the good behavior also and not just the bad behavior. So often at times it's like, you do this, you do that. And then I've had children, so I give them like this checklist to do with their parents. And a lot of times, most of the times, I would say 90%, children tick this thing which says, my parents notice only my bad behavior. They eventually, they do tick that. So you have to appreciate them for the smaller things that they do. Like, today you got up at 8 o'clock without me having to wake you up, and I'm glad. Okay, good job. Even that. We find it so difficult to give praise, but we're so quick on the criticism. So we should balance both, right? I would say less to criticism. So teach what not to do by telling them and appreciating them for what they do well.
Dealing with adolescents in the past and now is different. What new things should one add in the present? I think you've sort of answered that also in the
I
previous
answered
question.
this throughout all the 14
You're
questions.
so
I am
smart, yeah, I can't take it. So
yes.
this is an interesting question. Does childhood habits affect in any way, like biting nails?
Does it affect what?
It just says does affect in any way. I don't know what.
Okay, so I'm assuming that, like, okay, let's look at it two ways, right? Nail biting in adulthood, like there's a lot of psychological theories which describe why that actually happens. Some people say it's like a very anxious, stressing kind of a stress relief kind of a thing. Some people say that nail biting comes from not having your needs satisfied in childhood, oral needs, not being fed on time, things like that can result in a lot of nail biting later. But if it's something that you are conscious about, I think we have spoken about this, right? Being aware of something is the first step to change. So if it's not if it's a maladaptive behavior, then that your fact that you're conscious about it, it's important that you change that behavior and find out another way to relieve your anxiety. I think for some people it's a very unconscious thing, right? They do that, they pick their nails, they're aware of it. People might tell them like, they might hit them on the hand and say like, stop it, then you get back into it. So most of the theories do tend to point at childhood experiences of basic needs not being satisfied as to why it comes up. But I think we need to move away from the blame mode and saying, because you did not come to my room and I was crying as a baby, that's why I'm biting my nails now. But now you're an adult. You're a person who is capable of controlling your own behavior right now. So if it's something you're aware about, let's talk about what you can do to change it. I have plenty of resources available, so I'm going to leave that to the people who are better at Googling things than me.
That's it. That's all our
We have
questions.
gone through all the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much.
for teaching
Right.
us so much. I think we
I'm
learned a
so
lot. I also learned a
excited.
lot.
Right. So we can another time get back on the channel, and I will ask you the questions, and you can answer
Me?
with
You
yes.
set the standard so high. I don't know if I can do it, you know.
But
I'm not trained and all answering questions without me asking it
on a
also.
public forum.
Hmm?
You can't say no on a public forum.
Uh-huh.
Right.
You
So the
tricked
video
me.
link will be up by tonight, and I'll be putting it up on the page as well. So thank you so much for your questions. It was just wonderful. Thank you for being an amazing host and an entertaining one at that. It was lovely to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.